Welcome to the second VC Editor workshop. This is focusing on terms and mapping. Our first workshop was focused on building diagrams. And so we're going to be literally building on last week's work by now adding terms and mapping those terms onto the diagram that we built last week. So I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Dot Porter. I am the Curator for Digital Research Services and the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. I split my time with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, or SIMS. SIMS is a research and development group for working with manuscripts, broadly defined, physical and digital. So I do a lot of digital work, but the work also really focuses on the physical collections, including this little guy that you can see right here. This is LJS 101, and this is the book that I'm using as the example for all of these workshops except for the last one, which is different. And I've selected it because it's a great manuscript, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going on. So today, we're going to be able to take a lot of what's happening in this manuscript and describe it within the context of a VC editor diagram. So why don't I share my screen? And we'll get this VC editor open here. So this is a VC editor thing, and there's some other tabs that I have open. So here's VC editor. I have the bibliophily record for LJS 101 here. And then I also have the Franklin record. Franklin is Penn Library's online public access catalog, or OPAC, and it actually links to all of the different versions, online versions that we have. So you can see there's the bibliophily is a separate, an entirely separate thing. So that isn't even linked here, but we have our own online facsimile site. There's a video orientation that I did a few years ago that you can watch. We have our IIIF service and Open, which is a sort of raw data service. So you could download the whole manuscript, high resolution images of the whole manuscript from Open if you wanted to do that. But the reason that I have this open is because it has the table of contents listed right here, and we're going to want to do that. I also have this. This is the catalog, that is the glossary of the catalog of illuminated manuscripts of the British Library. So we're going to be using a couple of terms from here, and then I have notes to myself. So let's go back to VC Editor, and we'll open up LJS 101 and open up the project. So here is the diagram that we built during the first workshop. You can see it starts out, there are 3 quires of 4, and then there's several quires of 8, and then it closes with another quire of 4. As we went through the manuscript last week to build this diagram, we noticed that there are some instances where, for example, quires 2 and 3 are now 2 quires of 4. They used to be 1 quire of 8. There are sections where there are quires missing, and then again, 9 and 10 used to be a quire of 12. There is another diagram that is a reconstruction. I don't think we'll have time today to add terms to both of them, but there might be some interesting things happening if we can, so maybe we can do that. So let's go ahead and get started with building some taxonomies. So the way that VC Editor functions in terms of taxonomies and mapping is that you essentially create terms and then you say what taxonomy they belong to. A taxonomy in this case essentially being sort of a tag that you have on your term, and then you know which terms belong to which taxonomy. You can't, it's not like the taxonomy is a bucket and all the terms go in the bucket. It's more like the terms live out by themselves, and they have this description attached to them that says it's this taxonomy, which I don't know if it makes a functional difference. Basically, it means if you have a whole bunch of terms, you can't just say, show me all the terms that are in this taxonomy. So before I start doing the, actually start making taxonomies, it's a good idea to take a moment to think about what we're going to have, what our terms are going to be, and how we're going to organize them. So let's we'll start here at the bibliophily record, because what we have down here is the description of the decorations. And so I just want to take stock a little bit and say, okay, what are we dealing with in terms of decorations? So there are 5 9th century diagrams, 3 of them written in the ink of the text. Okay. And 2 that have colored inks added in the 11th century. We have 11th century full page decorated initial with Celtic knotwork and lion's head. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up because this is we'll just take a little teeny view of that. So that's that initial there. And there are 2 11th century 3-line initials in red and blue. And in fact, one of them is right here. And then there's another one later. 11th century red and blue ink added to 9th century 3-line initial, 1 and 2-line initials, mostly in the ink of the text, alternating with red in a section, 2 and 3-line and many 2-line, 11th century calligraphic initials and ink of the text with simple ornamentation in another section. So what I'm seeing here, the things that jump out at me is we have diagrams, we have initials, we have pigment, we have 11th century, and we have 9th century. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but one of the things that is particularly interesting about LJS 101 is that the core of it is 9th century. It's a translation into Latin by Boethius of a work of Aristotle, but then it has these 11th century sections around it that were pretty clearly made to go with that earlier part, as though they had that earlier part and they said, let's make a manuscript around it. So we want to, in our diagram, we want all of this to be clear when we're looking at it. So we'll be doing diagrams, pigments, and 11th century, 9th century, and initials. Okay, then the other part of this thing that's kind of important is that we have texts in this manuscript. So most of it is this Boethius translation of Aristotle. And it's actually not all together. It's in 2 sections. So there's 53 most folios of Aristotle, and then there's another couple of leaves towards the end. But there's some other stuff going on too. The very first leaf, so I'll open this up again, 1 recto, is the conclusion of a grammatical work along with a 7-line verse by Eugene of Toledo down here, and maybe some other things. These are the 2 main things. So this is sort of the end of a thing, and then the Aristotle begins, and then when we get to 53, get back here. That's where that text ends, and then we have what is, I think, a commentary on the Aristotle, and then we have a poem, some verse here. Oh, you can't see that very well. Let me stop my sharing, and then I will spotlight. Here we go. So here we have the verse starting here, and then we turn the page, and there is a sample letter from a monk to an abbot, and then there's more Aristotle here, and then there's more of the letter from the monk to the abbot. So there's something going on here, and maybe if we get it in the diagram, it will be better. So that's the contents of there. So we have contents, we have diagrams, we have pigments, and we have 9th century, we have 11th century, and we have initials. So these are all of the things that we are going to be both putting in our list of terms and then mapping, although not necessarily in that order. So the next thing we need to think about is organization. So let's go back to VisCol. I like to start by thinking of my taxonomies. So for this instance, in one case, so we have contents. So let's start with that. Contents, textual contents. There we go. So that will be one group. Then we have the time periods, right? Because we have 11th century and 9th century. So let's do that. We can call that centuries. Centuries create. And then we have diagram, initials, pigments. You could call that decoration. It's not really decoration. I'm going to call it diagrams and initials. Which kind of gives the game away a little bit, but that's okay. In reality, I would, if you're going to be using VCEditor for like a major project or an important project, I encourage you to think more intelligently about these than I am doing for this example. If you're just doing it on a one-off, I got to think through this manuscript, it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to be sharing this with other people, it's probably a good idea to be more thoughtful about it. So now we have our taxonomy. So now we're going to create some terms. Let's start with textual contents, and those are listed here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, really in the interest of time, I'm just going to take the things from the list here and put them in. So we have the conclusion of the grammatical work there. And this is going to be too long. There's a 100 character limit here. So I need to do this. So I'm going to 7-line verse, conclusion, grammatical work. I can't remember what I did last time. Isidore's definition. Maybe if I replace this with do. Oop, that's not right. Do. There we go. So we can see that there's something there. Now, when I click on this, it's going to show me all my taxonomies that I can choose from. I'm going to choose textual contents. Description and URI. If you want to write a more or provide sort of a more substantial description, you can do that here. If you want to put it in a URI, you can do that here. We'll do that for a couple of the other terms later, so we'll see that. Do you want to see it in the diagram? You click the box. Please note that it will only show in the diagram if you attach this term to a leaf or a side. If you attach it on the quire level, it won't show up in the diagram. It will still be there. If you export the data, that term will be there. It just doesn't show up in our interface. So if you had another interface where you could visualize the same data, you could make it show up. And if it's very important for you to see quire level notes, if you find that that's something you're using a lot and you really need VCEditor to show that, you can leave feedback. We have a feedback form over here. And I encourage you to leave feedback anytime there's something that you'd like to see, there's a change, you don't understand something, please leave feedback and we will listen to you. So we'll create that one, and then your terms show up here under this as a list here. So I'm just going to, I hope pretty quickly, go through and make these other ones there. So that textual contents, show in diagram. I want all of these to show in the diagram. Oop. Title, taxonomy, textual contents, show in diagram, create. There's that. Textual contents, show in diagram. The sample letter, which is just, I just love it. I think it's so neat. All right. And then miscellaneous verses. textual contents. There we go. All right, so now we have all of our textual contents. So for change of pace, let's go ahead and attach these terms to the diagram. So one recto is here. So when you click on any item, you'll get this window that pops up that shows you information about it. So here we have this leaf. We can see these are some of the things that we did last week, right? It's original to the manuscript. It's made of parchment. It tells you what leaf it's conjoined to. It's conjoined to leaf 4, so that's useful to know. We're not using any kind of attachment method. If it was sewn or tipped in, sewn being not sewn in at the middle of the quire, which is what you expect, but sewn in another place. Is it drummed or stitched? It's none of those things. It's not a stub. We've got a folio number, and then oops, I've attached the image files, which we'll be doing next week, but that's what it looks like when there's image files attached. And then you see here terms. So if we wanted to, we could attach a term to this leaf. However, for the contents, remember, we have one piece of contents that's on one recto. It's the conclusion of that grammatical work. And then the Aristotle starts on the next page. So we're actually going to attach it to the recto and the verso. So recto is where we see the hair and flesh information, script direction, and page number if there were pagination, which there isn't here. So we're going to attach a term to the recto, and it's going to be the conclusion of the grammatical work there. And then we are going to attach to the verso the Aristotle there. Now, because Aristotle runs from, I believe, 1 recto through 53 recto, is that right? Yep, through 53 recto, we can actually mass attach, bulk attach. So what I'm doing is I clicked on leaf 2, and now I'm going to scroll down to 50. So it's 53 recto. So I'm going to select through 52 by hitting Shift and then clicking 52. And then you can see this changes. So I can see that all of these leaves are original and they're all parchment. If I wanted to change that, I could click the box here and do that, but I'm not going to. These are all grayed out because they're different. There are different values for each of these, for each of the leaves. So we can't change those here. We could turn them all to stubs if we wanted to. Let's not do that. What we're going to do instead is come down to terms in common. So we're going to say this is all this Boethius translation, and we're going to attach that. And then that shows up as a term in common here. And this is what terms look like when you've done that. So then if we click out, so now I've clicked the quire, so now you can see the kinds of things that are available for the quire. But if I click on another leaf, you can see that here's the term that's been attached to that leaf. But it's through 53 recto. So again, we're going to say 53 recto. I'm going to attach this Boethius translation and attach that. And there we go. Next is 61 recto through 62 verso. So that's essentially 61 and 62 then is also this Boethius translation. So let's go ahead and attach that even though we're going out of order. 61 and 62. Remember that I told you, did I tell you this? 9 and 10 used to be a quire of 12. That is, quire 9 was literally inside of quire 10. And you can see that because we have Boethius, rather the Aristotle translation here, and then it ends here. And then 53 verso through 59 verso is this commentary. 53, so we'll start by tagging 53 verso is this commentary. attach. And that goes through 59 verso. So again, I'm hitting the shift key and that selects all of them. And because it's recto and verso, I can attach it this way. There we go. There's our commentary, attach. And I didn't mention it, but you can see that when I attach the terms, because I had that checkbox checked off in the taxonomy, in the term, the term selection, I checked that checkbox to say show in diagram, and this is what it looks like. It would be fine within the data model for you to select quires and here and say, these are all Boethius. In fact, I can do that. It will end up doing it twice. We can say, you know, these also have that. I've just tagged it 2 times on different things. It's totally unnecessary and might get messy later. But my point is that there's nothing here that on the quire level that says that this is the text. And so when I do this, I attach it on the leaf level. One, because I think it makes sense to me to say there's text on, you know, this leaf because it's a sort of a physical aspect of the leaf, but also because it shows up in the diagram. There. Okay, so we've got through that commentary. 60 recto, we have this poem. So let's go to 60 recto. 60 recto has this versus there, attach. And then, 60 verso and 63 recto has the sample letter of monk to the abbot. 60 verso, sample letter of monk to the abbot, and 63 verso. Did I say 63 verso? 63 verso, 63 recto. Is that better? Okay, sorry. I had to change the size of the thing, but you should be able to see it now. And here's the sample. Oh, here we go. I'll do that. There's the sample letter of monk to abbot on 63 recto, right? Oh, I attach it to the leaf. I didn't mean to do that. Cancel. There we go. So that's how you unlink a term, is you just click it off. 63 recto, sample letter of monk to abbot. There we go. And you can see this is just to clarify that this is attached to the recto verso. And here again, you can see how this quire, when it was part of the same quire with this, that you would have had the sample letter facing each other. And then 63 recto and through 64 recto is these miscellaneous verses. So 63 recto, 63 recto. So that actually starts on the same, it's sort of the letter ends and then these miscellaneous verses start. And then verso is these miscellaneous verses, and it goes through, what did I say, 64 recto. So then just the recto, and I think the verso of 64 then is blank. Let's see. Recto, miscellaneous verses, there we go. So that's the recto side, and then verso is indeed, that's blank. So that's why there's nothing on there. I could make a term that says blank, but I'm not doing that. And then I'm just double checking that everything has something attached to it. So these are on the leaf level. So the Boethius ends on 62 verso, and then we have the sample letter. Everything is here. We have that verse. Yep, great. So that's our contents. So that's sort of a major thing to attach. The next thing I want to do is the centuries. So I have, let's remind ourselves, we have a taxonomy for centuries. So I want it 9th century and I want 11th century. So we'll say 9th century, and it goes in the centuries one. And if I know that there are existing controlled vocabularies for time periods and things. And if I wanted to, I could find the URI that is sort of the official place for that term. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to do it myself. And then here we have 11th century. Show and diagram. Oop. If you don't select a taxonomy, it automatically picks unknown for you, I think. But I like to make my taxonomies. So there we go. So let's go quick. And these I am going to attach on the quire level. So quire terms. This is, and the terms just get added to the bottom. So this is 11th century, attach, and then where does it switch? I'm going to stop my share, do a quick switch over because it's fun to look through this and we can see, oop, and it opens right there. Here is where we're going. And I think you can, it's not super high resolution, but this is the 9th century and this is the 11th century. Very different, different writing there. So it's between 44 and 45. Yes, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think it is even in the phone thing. All right, here we go. So from 44 to 45, this is where we split. So here's the rest of our 9th century terms in common. No, sorry, 11th century. And then the rest of it is 9th. So even though you don't see it in the, no, 9th century. No, come on. I feel like I'm talking to my cat. Come on, there we go. All right, attach a term. Even though you don't see it here, it's there. It's in the data model. I promise you it is. And we can we'll take a look in a few minutes at how that looks. I mean, for one thing, you can see the terms in common here. And if I just clicked on one, you can see the 9th century term is there, even if you don't see it obviously in the diagram. All right, so the last thing to do, this is going to be a little bit fun because we've got our diagrams and initials. So I want to go back just a minute to this description, and I'm not going to read through all of these again, but it's clear that some of them are 9th century and some of them are 11th century. Some of them are colored and some of them aren't. The pigment in every case was added in the 11th century. So even if it's a 9th century diagram or initial that has pigment on it, that pigment was added later. And so instead of trying to make a term for each one of these combinations, I'm going to make 3 terms and then combine them. And we'll see how that works. So I'm going to make one for initial, and every page where there's an initial present, we will say initial, and it's in the diagrams and initials. And just to show you how the description and URI can work, I'm coming back to this glossary, the glossary of the catalog of illuminated manuscripts. And you can see here, I have this already pulled up. There's initial at the end of this. And what that is the link will take you directly to the section on initials. So I'm going to take this as it's not technically a URI, but it's a URL that will point you there. So we'll put that there. So you know that this is the definition of initial that I'm using. And an enlarged and decorated initial introducing an important section of text. And I'm just copying that there. This is the definition of initial that I'm using in this project. There could be others. So that's a good thing to know. And of course that gets added down at the bottom there. The next thing we're going to do is diagram. That also gets added to the diagrams and initials. The glossary for the British Library Catalog of Illuminated Manuscripts does not include an entry for a diagram. I think this is my memory. I tried. Nope, it does not have one. So I'm not gonna use one. I'm just saying it's a diagram. Create that. And then the last term is pigment. And there is an entry for pigment. Oh no, I'm in the wrong, hold on, I'm on the wrong page. There we go, pigment, P. Pigment, here we go. Pigment, the coloring agent in paint. So I'm going to, that is diagrams and initials. That's my URI and the coloring agent in paint. So it's probably not exact because there is some kind of paint that's been used. There's a lot of work happening, interesting work happening right now, scientific work being done on figuring out what specific pigments are made of. And you could certainly have a much more robust set of terms, even relating to pigment, you know, saying colors and materials that they're made of and this kind of thing. I could see, you know, if you had an illustrated manuscript that had blue and different sections of the manuscript had different, you know, blue paint that was made of different things, that would be something interesting that you could put in here. We don't care. It's just, is there pigment on there? Is there color? Yes. Okay, so show in diagram and create. There we go. So now we've got our initial diagram and pigment. So, right, let us see how this goes. I'm gonna try just starting from the top and going through. So we have 5 9th century diagrams, 3 in the ink of the text and 2 with colored inks added. Oh, actually, I'm going to add this information because this is important. It's easy to change a term. You just come in here and make whatever changes. The coloring agent in paint in LJS 101, all pigment is 7th century. Just so we know that that's for sure. Okay. I'm not going to delete it, but I could. Okay, back to here. So the 37 verso and 54 verso. So let's go 37 verso, 37 verso. And you can even, because I already attached the images, you can see them here. There's actually 2 diagrams there. But we will go ahead and attach those there. And there's no pigment, right? There's no ink. So we're not going to tag that. And 2 with colored added, 36, let's see, 36 recto, 34. Oh, let's go ahead and go to 54 verso because that's the second one. 54 verso. There we go. You can see it there. And we will attach that diagram there. And it just shows up here in the term. So it's really convenient to sort of see all of your terms at once. And you can also see them here, that this is the commentary and there's a diagram there embedded in the commentary. And then the 2 that have ink is 36 recto and 36 verso. 36 recto and 36 verso. And you can see here, and there they are with the pigment. And I am going to attach it separately to recto and verso because you actually have different diagrams on each side. So when I think about it, the situation is a little bit different than a text. If you have a running text that goes and goes and goes, I feel more comfortable saying it's the leaf or even it's the quire, whereas something like a diagram, it only appears on one side of the leaf. If you had somehow a diagram that appeared on both sides of the leaf, you could attach them. But I like this because you can see really clearly that there's separate diagrams on each side. All right. Oh, and right, these have pigment. So we're also going to say there's pigment attached. It isn't, we sort of know from context that the pigment is on the diagram because that's how this manuscript functions. I suppose it would be possible to have a different situation where what you couldn't assume that the diagram and the pigment are together. And in that case, you might want to think of a different way to do your terms to make it clear. You might actually want to have terms where it says, you know, pigment or diagram without pigment, diagram with pigment, just to make it clear. But here we know that that's what's happening. So, all right. 11th century full page. Oh, that's the big one on one verso. So we'll go back up to one verso. And we have that initial, and we have the pigment. Now, is this a great big huge initial or is it a little tiny initial? Our terms are not that precise, so we don't know. If that was important to you, you might want to have different levels. There are two smaller initials, 2 verso and 60 verso, and these are also colored. So 2 verso, is that 2 verso? 2 recto, I was gonna say, I think it's on 2 recto, 2 recto. So we have again an initial that has pigment. There we go. And 60 verso. So this is kind of one of the things that I find interesting about doing this is it sort of gives you a chance to slow down and look at where things are. And one thing I noticed about this, and you can even notice just looking at the description, is that sometimes things are sort of far apart. So in this case, we have these colored initials at the front and the back in the 11th century portions. But then there are other types of initials that are sort of clustered differently. And honestly, the way that I've done the terms, you lose that a little bit, which is my fault, and I should do my terms more carefully. But this is just for a workshop, so I hope you'll forgive me. Let's see, 11th century red and blue ink added to 9th century 3-line initial on 5 recto. So 5 recto, we have an initial that has pigment. Initial that has pigment. But because we're now in the 9th century section, we understand that this pigment was actually added much later than the initial was written. 5 recto, alternating with red, 30 through 34. So I'm not, let's see, 30 through 34 is initials, 30 through 34, and then 44 through 64. I am, because we're running sort of low on time, I'm not actually going to go through and do all of those. But if you did, you would see that there are, you know, I was talking about these clustering, you would see immediately that here there would be a whole bunch of initials. Every one of these leaves have initials, and then there's no initials, and then all of these leaves have initials. And maybe that means something. And if I was more careful with my terminology, you would also see that the initials here are calligraphic and the ones that come before are not. Is that it? Maybe it's a different scribe. You know, these are interesting things that you can see when you put your information in a visualization like this. All right, so we've done our taxonomies, we've made our terms, we have contents, we have centuries, we have initials and diagrams, we have a question. Yes, not a question. But yes, so it's a really interesting way to do that. Let's see, what else was I going to do? I think the other thing that I was hoping to do is maybe get started, because this is the manuscript as it exists today. And it doesn't look like this. It didn't look like this when it was originally created, but I have another diagram, which is here, this reconstruction open project. And you can see that here it's a different ordering. Oh, I had done this as an example. This is 5, and then this is 9. It's now 9. 9. The ordering is different because things got, moved around. And the same down at the bottom here, we have this quire of 8 that's now been tucked inside the quire of 4. And here's a bunch of missing quires here. So I thought, since we have a little time, I would put in the contents at least at the end, because there's something really satisfying about seeing those pieces that are out of order sort of come into order. Okay, so now we have something that could be done better, and that is there's no way to import terms. So I can't just say I want to have the terms that come from the other one, unless I was creating if I was going to create this new one out of the old one, and I'd already created the terms and the old one, I could clone it. We looked at cloning in the first workshop. I could clone it, and then I would be able to make changes to it, but I would still get the terms. But we can't do that there. So what I'm going to do instead is sort of create them from whole hog, create them from whole cloth. Whole hog is a different thing. So textual contents, create. Oh, and we've got, let's see. I love the labels on the diagram. I had used them in one of my collation projects, but didn't click the box. Yeah, you have to remember to click the box. I'll show you in a moment too. You can also make them appear and disappear. I didn't show that before, but I'll show that in a moment. So we have textual contents. So I'm just going to do this again. I think just I'm just going to do the end here, just enough to do the end to give me a taste of satisfaction. I think create and oops. That textual contents. That versus the sample letter. I love that sample letter. And then we have the miscellaneous verses. Okay. Show and diagram. All right, so this isn't everything because there's the bits at the front, but this will do for now. So what I want to do is come to the end, and 53 recto, and then let's see, 53 recto is the translation, 53, and so it's a little bit out of order, right? Because they got moved around. No, it's actually the translation, isn't it? There we go. Okay. 53 recto and 61 recto through basically 61 and 62. And look at that, 61 and 62 are right there. Isn't that nice? I think it's very nice. There we go. So now that's together. And then we have 60 verso is this verse there, 60 Oh, 60 recto, where's 60 recto? There's 60 recto, okay. Is this, oh, recto, there we go. Is this versus, okay. 53 verso through 59 verso. 53 verso. Through 59 verso. Look at that, we're filling it right in. There we go. And then we just have a couple more leaves. 60 verso and 63 recto is that sample letter. 60 verso. 60 verso. And 63 recto. This is just so satisfying for me. And then 63 recto through 64 recto is the miscellaneous verses. 63 recto, right? We're still there. Miscellaneous verses attach, and then verso. Miscellaneous verses attach, and then recto. Miscellaneous verses. Look at that. Okay, now here is what this quire would have looked like in the before when it was there. So I mentioned another way that you can sort of view terms. You can actually hide not all of them, but some of them. So here, if you don't want to see the folio numbers, you can hit this eyeball and it will show or hide one. So if you actually want to show the texture, if you say, okay, I'm not really interested in folio numbers, but I'm interested in hair and flesh, it will do that. Although it's not, I'm seeing now it's hair, flesh, which is not, I think actually that is not how it should. Flesh. No, that's wrong. All right, so I'm going to put in my own request because it should be hair, flesh, hair. And I thought that it was, but apparently it's not. So let's hide that. We'll forget about that. And we will go back to looking at folio numbers. So I've made this, and I want to do a comparison between the two. I want to look at the two of them together. So what I'm actually going to do is I am going to share, I'm going to get a shareable URL. You see it says view only. So I'm going to view this, and I'm going to have to change my screen share in a minute, but let me do this first. So I'm putting that in, and then I'm going to go back to close. Go back to VCEditor, and I'm going to open the other one that we were working on, the one that is the manuscript with everything in it. And I'm going to get my shareable URL here. And then I'm going to create another window and put that there. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to stop my share, but then I'm going to turn around and share my whole screen. Let's see. Oh, or I can shift to select multiple windows. Okay. I'm going to share these two, and what I'm hoping I can do is I can sort of show them side by side. All right. So can you guys see that? There's the reconstruction on the left, and the one that is as the manuscript is now. Yeah, like IIIF, but for collation modeling. And so you can see, even without all of the additional things, how different they are. And if we come down to the bottom, here we have quire 11 in this one, because we have these added missing, the missing leaves, or sorry, the missing quires have been added there. And you can see how this was combined together, how it used to be and how it sort of got taken apart there. So that is, it's at this point, it's a little, it's a little bit like you have to take it out and do it yourself. But I would love to see a future where there are, visualizations that really have embedded in them this idea of manuscripts changing over time, because the manuscripts do change over time. And so having a way to acknowledge that is pretty neat. So there's a couple of minutes. This is everything that I wanted to do today. Do you guys have questions or thoughts? Anything?
So Dot, this is great. I've only looked at this briefly, but how many preloaded taxonomies are there, if any, or do we make them all again for each new publication?
They are, stop, sorry, my alarm was going off. There are none. There are no preloaded taxonomies. So in the sense of the kind of taxonomies that I was doing, where you have where you have terms, that's all flexible and you build it yourself. The things that we have preset are things like hair and flesh and other kinds of settings that we see as being sort of more universal, things that we think most people would want to describe. The purpose of the taxonomies and the mapping is really to be flexible for people to use. But that said, I think that there's definitely potential for groups to work together to say, okay, here are all of the terms that we think, we want to use within our project or within our community. And, it would be wonderful if in the future we could have a thing where you could load in, where you could say, okay, these are the ones that I want, or we have a format and you push your document in whatever format in, so people can share that. Because I think sometimes you want to be, weird and esoteric, but a lot of times you want to be using the same terms as the next person is. And so, yeah, that is something that would be great.
Yeah, you're anticipating my question about creativity on the one hand, but also standardization for metadata. And in one sense, there were some things I hadn't anticipated you could do. And I thought, if there was a preloaded list of possibilities, oh, I could do that with this, right? So it would have been more obvious to me. The other would be that whole issue about how are things, sustainable and interoperable. So,
yeah, there's definitely like a, on one hand, standardization is great. On the other hand, being really flexible is great. And it's sort of it's almost like the TEI thing. If you've, been involved in the TEI, this was, the great thing about TEI is that there's a million things to do, anything. And it's sort of the same way with VCEditor. But yeah, I could definitely, I think we would be open to the idea of somebody coming up with a list of sort of, or different lists of terms that could be plugged in. I just hate the idea of giving, providing something like that, and then people thinking you can't do anything else beyond that, so I think we're working on it. Yeah.
Really helpful. Thank you so much.
Great. You're welcome.
Love these workshops.